The rain had gently started tapping on the cobblestone streets of the city, a metronomic precursor to the evening's events. For weeks, the whole town had buzzed with rumors and whispers about the grand masquerade ball at the infamous Whitmore mansion. The mansion stood atop a hill, a sentinel overlooking the town, with vines creeping up its walls and gargoyles perched on its turrets, silently watching over the centuries. I had received an invitation to the ball, slipped under my door with no return address, just an emblem of a raven embossed in gold. The mystery of it all had ignited my curiosity, and I found myself preparing for the night with a mix of anticipation and anxiety. When I arrived, the mansion seemed more magnificent than terrifying. Chandeliers with hundreds of candles illuminated rooms filled with laughter and the melodies of a string quartet. Everywhere I looked, there were masks. Beautiful, ornate masks adorned with feathers, gemstones, and intricate patterns, each one transforming its wearer into someone or something else. Some guests looked regal, some looked fantastical, and others downright eerie. However, amidst the sea of dancing figures, a particularly captivating sight drew me in. The grand ballroom was more massive than I had imagined, with large mirrors on the walls reflecting the revelers. In the center of the room stood a majestic clock, ticking away, reminding everyone of the fleeting nature of time. As I moved through the mansion, I heard hushed conversations about its history. There were tales of lost love, hidden passages, and unsolved mysteries. An elderly gentleman, his mask barely hiding the wrinkles of time, spoke of a legend. The mansion, he said, was once home to a beautiful young woman who would host masquerade balls in the hope of finding her lost lover. She would dance with every man, hoping to recognize her lover's touch, his embrace. But she never did. They say her spirit still roams these halls, searching. The tale sent shivers down my spine, and I couldn't help but feel a strange connection to it. Maybe it was the setting, the masks, or the air of mystery, but I felt like I was a part of a story much larger than that evening's ball. Hours seemed to pass in minutes, and as midnight approached, the atmosphere became even more electric. Secrets were shared, alliances forged, and in the heart of it all was the essence of the masquerade, identity, or the concealment of it. As I wandered, I felt eyes on me, a gaze that seemed familiar yet foreign. Trying to find its source, I came across a mask unlike any other I had seen that night. It was hauntingly blank, devoid of any feature, and yet, it was mesmerizing. As the night wore on, that blank mask would come to define my experience at the mansion, but at that moment, all I felt was an inexplicable pull, leading me into a dance of mystery, intrigue, and a touch of the supernatural. The grand ballroom had now reached its zenith of activity. Couples twirled, groups chatted, and some just stood by the periphery watching. I was amongst the latter, taking in the grandeur and the mystery of it all. The chandeliers above seemed to sway gently, casting moving shadows that danced along with the guests. It was then that the faceless figure approached me. The mask was more haunting up close. It seemed to absorb the light around it, creating a void in the midst of all the brilliance. With a subtle nod, the figure extended a gloved hand towards me, an invitation to dance. Entranced, I accepted. The music changed as we started dancing. It was an old waltz, its notes resonating with the history of the mansion. As we moved across the floor, it felt like the world had faded away. There was just the music, the two of us, and our synchronized heartbeats. The figure's movements were graceful yet controlled, each step executed with perfection. Their touch was cold, sending chills down my spine. Yet I was drawn to the enigma of my dance partner. The very air around us seemed charged with an electric tension. With each spin and twirl, I tried to peek behind the mask, to catch a glimpse of the person beneath. But it remained inscrutable, hiding its secrets well. Whispers filled the room as other guests took notice of our dance. "Who is that? Have you seen them before? Such an unusual mask." The murmurs grew louder, adding to the enigma of my dance partner. As the song neared its end, the figure leaned in, their cold breath brushing against my ear. "Do you believe in the tales of this mansion?" they whispered, their voice soft yet chilling. Before I could answer, they released me and disappeared into the crowd, leaving me breathless and bewildered. I stood there trying to process the encounter. The faceless figure, the haunting waltz, and that cryptic question. Who were they? Why had they approached me? And what did they mean by the tales of this mansion? Determined to find answers, I decided to delve deeper into the mysteries of the Whitmore mansion. Little did I know that my quest for answers would lead me down a path of secrets, legends, and a truth far stranger than fiction. Intrigued by the encounter, I began my journey into the depths of the Whitmore mansion. The main ballroom, with its vibrancy and revelry, felt worlds away as I ventured into the less frequented corridors. The dimly lit hallways whispered tales of times gone by, with portraits of long-forgotten family members staring down from the walls. Their eyes seemed to follow me, watching silently as I delved deeper into the mansion's heart. In my search, I came across a quaint library, its walls lined with dusty tomes and ancient manuscripts. I felt drawn to a particular leather-bound book, its pages yellowed with age. It was the journal of Lady Eleanor Whitmore, the same lady from the legend. Her entries spoke of grand parties, of love, of loss, but as the dates progressed, the tone changed. Descriptions of her lover's sudden and mysterious disappearance, her undying hope for his return, and her eventual descent into despair. One entry, however, stood out. October 31st, 1821. Tonight's masquerade was unlike any other. A stranger adorned with a faceless mask danced with me. His touch, his presence felt eerily familiar. Could it be him? But when I tried to unveil the face behind the mask, he vanished, leaving behind more questions than answers. The similarities between Lady Eleanor's experience and mine were uncanny. The faceless stranger, the haunting dance, the cryptic words. Were our fates intertwined, or was this merely a trick played by the mansion? Determined to find the mysterious stranger, I resumed my search. I moved from room to room, each more opulent and mysterious than the last, until I found myself before a heavy wooden door at the end of a secluded corridor. The door to room 313, the room spoken of in hushed tones and cautious whispers. Gathering my courage, I turned the handle and pushed it open. The room was bathed in moonlight, with a large, ornate mirror reflecting the pale glow. But there was something else. A silhouette of a figure, the same faceless mask, standing by the window. As I stepped closer, the figure turned, its blank mask facing me. My heart raced as memories of the dance flooded back. The room's chill intensified, and I could feel the weight of centuries of secrets pressing down on me. Without a word, the figure pointed towards the mirror. Hesitant but curious, I approached. My reflection began to shimmer and change, revealing scenes from another time. Lady Eleanor dancing with a masked figure, their love evident in their embrace, their separation, her despair, and the tragic tale that bound their souls to the mansion. The mirror's images faded, leaving behind a profound realization. The faceless figure wasn't just a mysterious guest. He was a trapped soul, bound to the mansion by a love that transcended time. And perhaps, just perhaps, I was the key to setting him free. A brilliant autumn moon hung high in the sky as the evening of October 31st approached, casting a silver glow over Lyndon Woods. The rich scent of pine, the distant hoot of an owl, and the cool nip in the air all signaled the promise of another memorable Halloween night. But this wasn't just any ordinary night in our town, and certainly Lyndon Woods was no ordinary forest. Every year, as tradition dictates, the townspeople of Lyndon gather deep within these woods to celebrate Halloween. It's a festivity like no other, where old stories are told, bonds are strengthened, and the legend of the Whispering Witches is always at the forefront of everyone's mind. I arrived just as the party began to gain momentum. Families spread their blankets, children darted around in their costumes, and the older folk gathered to exchange stories of the past. The heart of the gathering was a massive bonfire, around which the townspeople danced and sang. Its flames leaped high, causing shadows to play mischievously on the trees, making the forest seem alive. Yet as much as I loved this annual gathering, I couldn't shake off a feeling of unease. Perhaps it was the stories about the witches or just the vastness of the woods that surrounded us. But there was no denying the electric charge in the atmosphere, a sense of anticipation, as if the woods themselves were waiting for something or someone. As the night wore on and the merriment continued, I felt more and more drawn to the depths of the forest, curious about the truth behind the tales, and eager to explore what mysteries Lyndon Woods might be hiding. As I ventured deeper into the woods, that the legends were not just tales meant to scare children. They were rooted in reality, and soon I would find myself face to face with the very whispers of the past that had for generations haunted these woods. As I meandered deeper into the woods, I could hear the sounds of the party becoming fainter and fainter. The comforting orange glow from the bonfire was replaced by the shimmering silver hue of the moonlight filtering through the dense canopy of trees. Every rustle of the leaves, every distant animal sound, seemed amplified in the profound silence that surrounded me. I was drawn to an old, worn-out path overgrown with weeds and covered with fallen leaves. The path was barely visible, but something compelled me to follow it. The legends always spoke of the whispering witches residing deep within Lyndon Woods, in a place where few dared to tread. Could this be the path leading to their hidden lair? With each step, the forest seemed to grow denser, the trees leaning inward as if sharing ancient secrets. My heart pounded in my chest, not just from the physical exertion but from the realization that I was treading where perhaps no living soul had walked for years. Suddenly I heard it, the unmistakable sound of faint whispers carried by the wind. At first I dismissed it as my imagination, but as I continued, the whispers became more persistent, more pronounced. They seemed to come from all directions, a cacophony of voices from another time. Words and phrases intermingled, making it hard to discern any single message. Yet one phrase was unmistakably clear, repeated over and over: "Come closer." Driven by a mix of fear and curiosity, I followed the voices, trying to trace their origin. The path led me to a clearing, and in its center stood an ancient stone circle, moss-covered and worn by time. It was said that these circles were places of power, where the witches conducted their rituals and ceremonies. As I approached, I felt a sudden drop in temperature and a dense fog began to roll in, engulfing the clearing. The whispers grew louder, more desperate, urging me to step into the circle. But before I could decide my next move, the unexpected happened. Inside the stone circle, the fog grew so thick I could hardly see my hand in front of me. Yet the whispers became even more vivid, their desperation palpable. They were no longer mere echoes but voices, as clear as if their owners stood right beside me. Suddenly, from the depths of the mist, ethereal figures began to emerge. Transparent, wraith-like apparitions, they wore hooded cloaks that trailed on the ground. Their faces were obscured by shadow, but their eyes shone bright, reflecting centuries of pain, longing, and desire. I was paralyzed by a mix of terror and fascination. These were the whispering witches of legend, trapped between the world of the living and the dead. And for some reason they had beckoned me. One figure stepped forward, her movements graceful yet tinged with sorrow. Lifting a pale hand, she pointed to the center of the stone circle, where an ancient book lay, bound in leather and adorned with mysterious symbols. "Remember us," the lead witch whispered, her voice echoing the sentiment of all the spirits present. "Our story, our truth lies within those pages. But heed our warning. With knowledge comes responsibility. To know our story is to carry our legacy." Compelled by an unseen force, I reached out to grasp the book. Its pages were brittle, filled with tales of magic, betrayal, and a curse that bound the witches to Lyndon Woods. The witches had once been guardians of the forest, protectors of all who resided within. But a dark force, threatened by their power, had ensnared them, turning the townspeople against them, leading to their tragic end. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. The book spoke of a prophecy, a descendant of the whispering witches who would one day break the curse and free their spirits. As I read the signs and portents described, I realized with a growing horror that they all pointed to me. The weight of the realization made me stumble back. The mist began to recede and the apparition started to fade. The lead witch's voice echoed one last time, filled with hope and sadness. "Remember us. Free us." As dawn's first light broke, I found myself back at the edge of the forest, the partygoers' laughter echoing in the distance. The ancient book clutched tightly in my hand served as the only proof of my harrowing encounter. It started out as a mundane October evening. I had just settled into my couch, a cup of hot cocoa warming my hands when the doorbell rang. As I opened the door, I found no one there. Instead, on my doorstep was a black velvet envelope peculiarly out of place. Upon opening it, I found an ornate invitation. Its silver calligraphy shone under my porch light, inviting me to a Halloween soiree at the old Blackwood mansion. The location caught my attention immediately. Everyone in town knew about the Blackwood mansion. It had been deserted for years, a massive stone structure standing atop Raven Hill, with rumors of its dark history circulating among townfolk. Some said it was cursed, while others believed gangsters used to hide out there in the 1920s. The common consensus? People avoided it, especially after dark. But here I was, holding an invitation to a party there. The invite mentioned a midnight gathering, a step back in time, and promised an unforgettable evening. There was no sender's name, only a peculiar symbol at the bottom, a raven encircled by thorns. My logical side screamed at me to dismiss it as a prank. But curiosity, that insatiable beast, whispered otherwise. Against better judgment, I found myself considering the prospect of attending a party at the town's most infamous address. I had no way of knowing then that this would be an evening unlike any other, one that would haunt my memories for years to come. Dressed in my best suit, which now felt quite underwhelming for such an occasion, I drove up to the mansion. The full moon cast an eerie glow on its towering spires, making the ivy-covered stone walls glimmer. As I approached, I could hear the faint, melancholic tunes of a piano, its notes floating through the night like ghostly whispers. The front door was a massive wooden structure, but it was slightly ajar. The main hall was dimly lit, with candles illuminating portraits of stern-faced individuals, presumably the Blackwoods. The floorboards creaked underfoot, echoing through the vast emptiness of the mansion. Following the music, I reached the grand ballroom. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, their light reflecting off of gilded mirrors. The room was filled with guests in period attire, reminiscent of the Roaring '20s. Flapper dresses, feathered headbands, sharp tuxedos. It was like stepping onto the set of an old Hollywood movie. But what caught my attention wasn't the elaborate clothing or even the lively Charleston dance steps. It was the atmosphere. Despite the music and laughter, a tangible tension hung in the air. Conversations were hushed, with frequent glances over shoulders, as if everyone was expecting or fearing an uninvited guest. As I mingled, I realized that many of the attendees were strangers to me, despite our town's small size. Their accents were varied, hinting at origins from far and wide, and when I tried asking how they knew of this event or who had invited them, answers were evasive, further deepening the mystery. One particular detail stood out. Many of them wore a pendant or brooch with the same symbol as the invitation, the raven encircled by thorns. An old man with a weathered face and piercing blue eyes leaned in and whispered, "Do you know the legend of the Blackwood Raven?" Before I could answer, a loud bell tolled, signaling midnight. The music stopped abruptly and the ballroom's grand door slammed shut. The party, it seemed, was about to truly begin. The sudden silence in the ballroom was palpable. Guests turned their attention to a small stage at the far end where the old man who had whispered to me now stood, a spotlight illuminating him. He cleared his throat, and the entire room seemed to hang on his every word. "Good evening, honored guests," he began, his voice carrying an authority that demanded attention. "I see many familiar symbols among you tonight." He gestured to the pendants and brooches. "The Blackwood Raven, a symbol of our hosts and a mark of the legacy of this mansion." He continued, recounting a tale from the early 1900s, when the Blackwood family were the wealthiest in town. Their affluence, however, was shrouded in rumors of dark dealings and occult practices. The family's patriarch, Lord Edgar Blackwood, was particularly obsessed with eternal youth. Legend had it that on a fateful Halloween night, he performed a forbidden ritual, using the energy of the partygoers to summon an otherworldly entity. The intent: to strike a deal for immortality. But things didn't go as planned, the old man said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Instead of granting Lord Blackwood his wish, the entity, represented by the raven, trapped the souls of every person in the mansion, binding them to this place for eternity. Lord Blackwood's lust for power had doomed them all. The story was met with a mix of gasps and murmurs. I looked around, trying to gauge reactions. The crowd was a blend of skeptics, believers, and those visibly unnerved by the tale. "And so every Halloween, the souls of those trapped here rise, looking to claim replacements so they might find a momentary release," the old man concluded, his gaze drifting to the grand clock. "And as tradition dictates, at the stroke of one, our gathering will culminate in a dance of souls. I invite you all to participate, but remember, choose your partners wisely." As the old man left the stage, the haunting notes of a violin filled the room, and guests hesitantly began pairing up. The atmosphere was electric, with a mix of fear and anticipation. I couldn't help but wonder, was this all just a performance, a tale to enhance the Halloween experience? Or had I stepped into something far more sinister? The night was far from over, and the dance of souls had only just begun. The music began, slow and haunting. The guests, now paired up, started to dance, their movements graceful yet cautious. The atmosphere in the room felt dense, as if charged with energy. I found myself pulled into the rhythm, swept up in the mystery and allure of the evening. As I danced, my partner, a woman in a stunning flapper dress with raven black hair and striking emerald eyes, remained eerily silent. Each time I attempted conversation, she'd simply smile enigmatically, her gaze never leaving mine. There was something hypnotic about her, drawing me closer with every step. Around us, the dance floor had transformed into a swirling sea of shimmering gowns and sharp tuxedos. The dim light of the chandeliers reflected off the ornate masks, making it nearly impossible to distinguish one dancer from another. I began to notice something peculiar. The reflections in the grand mirrors surrounding the ballroom didn't seem to align with reality. The figures in the reflection danced more fervently, their movements more erratic and desperate, and their eyes, glowing an unnatural shade of green, were filled with a mix of pain, longing, and hope. The music grew faster, more intense. The air in the ballroom became stifling, making it harder to breathe. As I spun with my partner, I caught glimpses of the old man from earlier, standing by the grand clock, watching intently. As the clock's minute hand inched closer to the one, the dancers became more frantic, their steps more forceful. In the shadows of the night, if our tales from unsettling horror stories gave you a fright, press like and let it be known. Subscribe, so you're never alone in this haunting journey, and share, so others too can be wary. Until our next sinister tale, stay dark, dear listener.